Well, hello and welcome to week 4 of the Zwift Racing League WTRL. I'm joined by Dave Towle for the America's West Team's time trial. And Dave, based on the racing we've had today, tonight's going to be a cracker.
Without any doubt, Kate, what we've seen has been some incredibly close racing. And I have to say, this is my favorite course now. I know you're out there, in North America time early in our morning here, as I'm going to nickname you the bookend because you get the honor of being with us to start the day and wrap up the day. But you guys got us off to a great start today down there. And I tell you what, we had one race today, Kate. It was in the Europe, Middle East, Africa time zone, where we had 5 teams within 10 seconds of each other at the top of the table. So we're getting to the middle part of the season now. We're starting to see the top teams are making their mark, and we're starting to see what 2 teams are going to advance up into Premier League.
Well, we're on week 4 of the racing. The first week, of course, and the third week were the points races. Week number 2 was the team's time trial. So this is the second round. In APAC, Dave, we saw that a lot of the teams had obviously done a little bit of homework on strategy. They've obviously been practicing the format a bit because the time differences were quite significantly different, especially around the middle rankings to the first time around. And I feel like that might be something that's been consistent across all the leagues.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. That's really well put, because what you're seeing now is the teams, when you talk about a steep learning curve, well, part of that is that the talented athletes will pick this up very quickly once they understand the task at hand. And didn't you notice that, Kate, that the top riders who hadn't been doing WTRL, it didn't take them too long to understand and grasp what's happening here. It is interesting, though. And one thing I've really learned is having 2 strong riders and then a big drop off on your team is really hard to manage out here. That having that a team where we saw it with Hino in the Premier League, and we saw it with quite a few teams in our community league racing here today, Kate, where the teams that have a nice balance, a distribution of power throughout the team, have a huge advantage in the team time trial discipline. Maybe not as much in the points race. And so that's where with this going back and forth every week has been awesome. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, the time trial specialist squads, Revo, ATP Swarm, the Doom Kittens. There are a lot of teams to look at today. Anyone standing out to you? I don't want to put you on the spot or put you under any pressure, but we've learned a lot from this course. It brings. I'm going to just say this is my favorite team time trial course. Let me just throw that one to you, Kate. What are your thoughts on the course?
Well, it's a pretty good course. It's just shy of 30 kilometres. It would be easy to say that it's mostly flat, but it absolutely is not. At around the 8 kilometre mark, they hit the hilly KOM reverse, which is tough because it only takes the slightest incline in the Zwift world to create a whole lot of problems through a team. It's interesting what you say about the teams that specialise more in the team's time trial and maybe a little bit at less of an advantage in the points racing. And we've certainly seen that across the leagues where some of the teams might hit the virtual podium for the team's time trials, but when it comes to the points racing, they're less of a force. So I think tonight is a big opportunity. Certainly in the women's division, though, tonight, Dave, I think the overall standings are fairly consistent with the results we also saw in the time trial last time. So let's take a look to start at those overall boards and we can get a bit of a feel for what teams are dominating. So let's start here with the women, America West Division A, and Revo's scores. They won the last TTT. They are leading on 59 points. ATP Racing Swarm only 1 point shy on 58. Cryogen Mount Evans on 50. BRT Doom Kittens 49. In 5th, Instafund La Prima. In 6th, Wattle Inc. WB. In 7th, Penn Velo WB down on 42 points. The Revo Musketeers in 8th. And the AHDRL Bada Boom, they are in 9th. It is a very tight top end and a very tight middle, but certainly those first 2 teams look to be quite dominant. Let's take a look at the men's standings so far. Dave, I'll hand over to you.
Sure, you bet. And we will have our men out on course today as well. Both races will actually be happening concurrently. Thanks, Nathan. As we're going to jump right in, taking a look here at the Dirty Rascals Riot. So this again is America's West, our final division of the day as we've made our way around the globe. And the 1A men, Dirty Rascals Riot with 58-56 for FW Gold Rush. So you can see much the similar to the women we just looked at. It really bunches up then with 47 points for ZHQ, the Rockets, and Costa Rica. So they're tied in third right now. And we'll see what kind of a run they can make at it. The DDC Hayes, Dutch Diesel Cycling, they're deadlocked here with, oh my God, they killed, or OMG, they killed Kenny, and Audi A. So three teams sitting on 44 here on our table, and just 1 point back there would be Cryogen Pirasor. Then we have Pen Velo A and Alto Velo Racing rounding out our top 10. That's the 1A men. Back to you, Kate, for the 1B women.
Oh, there's so many divisions, which is really good, isn't it, Dave, that there's so many people out there racing. So let's take a look at the Men's America West Division B. We've got KRTB, the Big Timbers, leading on 58 points. The Dirty Rascals Stampede on 55, a very similar pattern to the other divisions, with those two significantly out in front. In third, we've got ATP Racing Krypton, DDC, the Zeal Breakers in fourth on 47 points. Wattle Inc. B1 on fifth. Zwift Dusters on 43 points at sixth. TFC Pickle Juice, gee, that doesn't sound particularly enticing, I've got to say, the Pickle Juice. Dirty Rascals Beliebers, there must be a Justin Bieber fan in there. Pen Velo B1 in ninth, and Audi B sitting in 10th. So again, a division that is very divided. And over to the Division C, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Kate. I'm going to revisit pickle juice with you. Do you even have pickles in Australia? We'll find out. Cryogen Grand Colombier. That's going to be a perfect score right now. We've done 3 races in our 8-race ZRL, the Zwift Racing League Series. So they haven't missed a step. 3 wins out of 3 tries. Let's see if they can make it 4 for 4. I'll tell you one team, Kate, that doesn't want them to. That's certainly going to be the Dirty Rascals Ambush, as they'll be coming for them full guns ablazing. It's sitting third right now in our points table after 3 races of 8. Zeus Uncontrollable. And fourth is going to be Lightning Velo. Dirty Rascals Grind in fifth. And you can see how, again, very tightly bunched up here. 50, 47, 46. Then Panda Candy Racing sitting at sixth with 44 points right now. Deadpool's X-Force, just 1 point back in seventh. Then you've got Dirty Rascals Affogato. They're sitting on 32 points in eighth. The ZHQ Rebels, you know, that count on the Rebels to start climbing up the table here. Sitting at ninth, and then Aero Appaloosa. That rounds out our top 10. Again, that's the men. West Division, the C's.
Well, there's certainly a bit of a naming convention going on. The Dirty Rascals like to go with drinks, and I must say the Affogato sounds a little bit nicer than the Pickle Juice. And, of course, the Cryogen, they're going with the mountains. So we've got the Perisord, we've got Mount Evans. So I like that. Some good naming conventions. The riders are out on course, so let's head down and watch them race those pictures. We expect them to be out there around the 40-minute mark for the women. That's with what APAC was doing earlier, and also some of the divisions during the day. Let's talk a bit about some of the strategy you may have seen out on course today, Dave, because you have been in the combox for a while. This to me looks like they're taking the strategy of a bit of a hybrid, so they are a bit stretched out at the front and a bit more of a blob at the back, but they need to be careful. They've got 6 riders. They're only 4 kilometres in, less than 10% into the overall. But critically, Dave, at the 8K mark or 7.5 kilometre mark, they will hit that KOM. And we certainly will need them to have a fair amount of control heading into that if they want to keep it quite neat. Is this kind of blob hybrid strategy something that you've seen a lot of the teams deploy?
Well, let me jump right in on that, Kate, because we had a great discussion with Nathan Guerra earlier today, and we kind of broke it down into exactly what you're saying and then adding on a little more. And I believe it was either you or Anna Russell that we kind of referenced on that. Nathan giving credit for the chaos style as well. I'm going to see what you think about that here. But the one I wanted to add is what I was calling the old school. But basically, think the Italians or the Soviets, four riders, single file, 30-second to minute long pulls, right, Kate, rotate off the front, slot back in. If you have to miss a pull, you skip a pull, but basically it's as straightforward as it gets. There's nothing too fancy about what I call that old school single file technique. You mentioned the blob. Well, this is going to be, that's not even hybrid now. So this is a good learning moment here. Wadi Inc. is the team. It's a clothing manufacturer. They make great cycling stuff out of it. They're really popular in Southern California. And you can see here, then, so this is a hybrid, right, Kate, that we're looking at right now if we want to start working on our definitions, because we have made some major advancements just in a couple races here as part of the community ZRL League of understanding what the teams are thinking. There have been some good YouTube videos that have been put out, but I'm going to call this hybrid. Would you agree with me, Kate?
I would agree. Yeah, I think they're also really finding their groove kind of early on in this 30-kilometer race. So they're only 5K in. When we start to see the split times, we'll get a bit more of an understanding of how their strategy is playing out. Because what we want to see is the riders maintain fairly, or the teams maintain fairly uniform gaps through those different time checks. If they're really up at the 6 or 12-kilometer mark but starting to fade at the 18-kilometer mark, it can be sure that they've gone out a bit too hard in those last 12 kilometers from split number 3 into that finish line at the 30K mark are going to be a little bit murderous. And this is a very big moment for each team. We're seeing them not even on the slopes of the KOM yet. They're just going over a few bumps before they do actually hit that climb. But there are gaps opening up already. So this says to me that they need to start communicating a bit better, because sometimes I think the strongest riders, Dave, they go to the front on these climbs and they think they're doing the right thing by the team by pulling them along and picking up the pace. But actually they can really be doing a lot of damage and tearing that team apart a bit more than is helpful. So they head through the Italian villas, they go over a little bit of dirt, and then they go onto the slopes of that KOM, and they need to look after one another.
Yeah, it really is interesting, your perspective when you look at it, Kate, whether you're the strongest rider on the team or the rider. And that's why I was saying having that distribution being done equally. Let's use Hino as the perfect example of that. All 5 riders are so well paired out there. When you have more than 1 watt per kilogram FTP difference between riders, it is a challenge from both directions. And I really do understand the perspective of the rider who's trying to be the fourth wheel that the time comes off, but who is getting gapped. It's interesting, right? I was talking with Nathan about this, where some people psychologically, you can encourage them by getting after them, right? Saying, "Come on, let's pick it up, let's go, come on, you can do better." Other riders need a pat on the back. And I don't know what kind of a rider were you, Kate? How did you respond to stimuli? Did you like having someone barking at you, or did you like positive? So different riders work different ways. I'm sure you've seen that on teams that you were on, how riders would respond differently.
Yeah, horses for courses. I guess you could throw that in both the physical and the
Sure.
mental bucket. I mean, personally, I liked a bit of let's say I was hybrid, because I liked supportive barking. I didn't mind somebody
Perfect. Good
being
answer.
quite
Yeah.
vocal and a bit commando, but I did appreciate if they also had positive things to say amongst that. And I think it does go a lot to communication. That can almost become the bingo word of any team time trial analysis, is how well are these riders communicating? How are they communicating? Anna Russell was talking last night about how they'd tried without an independent team manager or director. They tried to communicate as riders while Zwifting, but that it turned into a bit of a heavy breathing, grunting kind of effort, because all of their heart rates were so high that it wasn't doing them any good trying to communicate in that way. And so I think whether they're non-verbal cues, whether they've got the video up on Discord and they're checking each other's body language to see how they're going, perhaps they go in with a very firm strategy, and unless something changes and it's communicated that it changes, they stick to that. Or perhaps they do have a rider who is taking the lead on the road, even if they have to muster a little bit of extra oxygen to bark some orders. But I must say, it is pretty hard to have when your heart rate is as high as these riders are going, anything over 150. It's hard to sound calm when you're communicating. It's all well and good for
So
us to sit
true.
here in a nice, calm voice, but if you put us on an ergo and raced us around the Magnificent Eight, I'm not sure we would sound quite so polite.
I completely agree, Kate. I mean, your average person, if you put their heart rate up at 185 beats per minute, they would honestly think they were having a heart attack and would be being rushing themselves to the hospital. So to think that these athletes can communicate at all when they're in that spot of bother is really quite incredible. But I agree with you, and I think that holds true for just about every part of life, whether it's work or home, is keeping an open line of communication and understanding where people are at is really, really true. So getting some splits in right now, obviously Wadi ain't going out hard. They're going to have a nice 10-17. So it's going to be a little different here with the 7 teams that we have. We're going to be able to stay really on top of these splits here as at this point now. We send teams out every minute, so everybody should be out on course here as well. So we're looking at the Revo Musketeers with an 11-16. And we'll be looking for the Australian Hump Day Ride ladies. That is what AHDRL, the L is ladies, correct? The bada boom there. Kate, I'm assuming
Yes,
you're hip
correct.
to all Australian
Right.
lingo. Yep.
Oh, totally hit. And
so
I'm
while we
not
have a
sure if
second,
Americans know what bada boom is, but
well, we do because of the Sopranos, a TV show here on HBO. The Bada Boom was a
oh
club that
yes.
Tony Soprano owned. Yeah. So pickle juice in the United States. I don't know if pickles are a worldwide thing or not. I know vinegar is, so I would think that pickled stuff exists everywhere. But pickle juice here in the States, I would say it's an old school, not quite a wives' tale, but there's not scientific proof, Kate. But some athletes believe that pickle juice will help you resist cramping, right? So they'll take a slug of straight pickle juice, which is basically vinegar water, right, with a few spices in it,
I
and
Yeah.
it helps with
I'm gonna
cramping.
have to
You ever hear
Google
that?
what pickles. I'm gonna have to Google this because I don't even. I'm not even sure what a pickle is, to be honest. Other than apparently there's a pickle on a McDonald's hamburger. That's the only reference I've heard to what a pickle is. But
Okay,
maybe it's a
Kate.
cucumber or something. I'll have to Google it.
Kate, okay. First off, we don't put beets on our hamburgers here in the United States because we're not out of our minds. We do pickles, and pickles are cucumbers that are basically soaked in vinegar. And again, this is a nation, folks, that put beets and eggs on their hamburgers. Just so we're clear. Don't mean to
Oh
be
yeah,
jumping
of
on you,
course we
Kate.
do.
But,
Well, no, I think actually,
so
we might be onto something here with the hamburger science because a lot of the Australian athletes are drinking beet juice and believe that that has a very positive benefit on athletic performance. So the Aussies are drinking beetroot juice, and you guys are drinking pickle
I
juice. And just quietly,
well,
Dave, I'm going to throw it out there that beetroot juice is probably a little bit better on the taste buds.
I could agree with that. Beetroot, I think sometimes I've heard it called. And I think there's more science behind the beets, to tell you the truth. It's supposed to be good for your blood, right? Help you oxygenate your blood naturally a little bit more. I believe that's what I've
Yeah,
heard.
that's right. That is right. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Some dilation,
All right,
vascular
let's just
dilation, as our man Nathan. Yes. We're
oh,
not
well,
scientists
there's a lot
here
of
at
vascular
Zwift Community
dilation
Live.
going out on course for these poor riders right now. A lot of red faces. Well, we're watching Cryogen, Dave. This is interesting because they are on the bottom slopes of this reverse Hilly KOM, and a gap has opened up. Aldridge is having to bridge back across to Hutter.
So,
They need to temper this effort and make sure that they do stay together because there's only 4 riders. If we look at the split times on the left, it reflects the start order, but it doesn't reflect how they performed in the last team's time trial, which is slightly different to how they are looking overall. Now, something that has struck me is the difference between the Revo Musketeers and Watty Inc. There's nearly a full minute differential there. But in the first time trial, team's time trial, over the 30 odd K, there was only a minute and a half difference altogether. So either Watty Inc. have gone out a little bit too hard, and we may see a bit of a mushroom cloud at the end. Or it's possible that they've worked really hard on their formation. But Cryogen Mount Evans, it looks here like they're in a little bit of trouble. They do need to sit up and regroup because one rider on her own, Big Liazzi, obviously climbing really well, but she needs to ease off. That heart rate is very high. Her power is very high. She needs to back off and wait for a teamies.
Some talk today, Kate, people mentioning that this rider, this situation, you're almost better to sit through the middle part of the climb near the back of the group and then help coax them along and give them a wheel to follow. Again, it's a fine line out there, but let's look at this 9:33 now. 6 seconds and faster than ATP Racing Storm. So Revo scores out fast. That's really an interesting first split at 6K. Mount Evans, that famous Colorado mountain, is the Cryogen, the team, not a pastry, but a mountain at 10:03 back. Then we've got Wadi Inc. at 10:17. Inside joke there, but we have had so much fun with all of these team names, but every now and then they can slip one past us. That's for sure. So bada boom, we mentioned HDRL. That's the fifth place right now with the 10:30, but that 9:33, very quick. We're already kind of looking as everybody's through that check, Kate. The cream is rising to the top here. This is the part of the course, we've said this today, that you're not going to win the race right now, but you can find yourself in real trouble.
Yeah, the 6K split is an interesting one, but I think far more telling will be that 12K. It's not quite at the halfway mark, but it has gone over that KOM that certainly could lose a race. Revo Scores did win the last team's time trial by around the 1.5 minute mark. So they've gone out fairly, what I would say, conservatively.
Conservative, sure.
And it is hard from early splits, Dave, to know whether they've gone out conservatively or whether ATP Racing Swarm has actually gone out quite hard. And I guess we will see what happens at the 12K mark as to that. But on screen, we're looking at the BRT. They've still got 6 riders. They're only 8K in, but we saw a lot of riders, certainly in APAC, a lot of teams, losing a lot of riders in that first 10K. They were down to 4. So having 6 is pretty good, but there's a few gaps opening up, and it's like an elastic band, isn't it? Once you lose 1 meter, it's very easy for that to turn into 3 meters, 5 meters, and you get that message of doom on the screen to tell you to catch up, essentially. It's like a little nudge, but it can be fairly disheartening.
You're watching that meter number there, and I agree with you. It's really interesting how you try to coax the best out of riders. This team doing a pretty darn good job here now as we're taking a look at BRT. This is the Doom Kittens. I was mentioning earlier, we were talking about Cryogen, and I'm sure we'll be back with them later. But right now, this is a team to watch, no doubt about it. Diane Bowman, so an international team if there ever was one as well. The Doom Kittens have Barreto, the Mexican rider, the Canadian Bowmans. Then you've got 2 riders out of Australia, Heidi Hose and Meg Brown. Patty Godoy, so 2 Mexican riders as well. And then the lone American on the Doom Kittens is Rose Garner. So that's the team we're looking at right now, again, as they make their way right into, I was calling this the crux of the race here, the most challenging couple kilometers, and they're right in the middle of it now.
Yeah, I think this is the bit where if they had a team director sitting in the car behind them, he would be biting his fingernails watching everybody approach and go over that KOM. But BRT, they were super aggressive last week in Richmond, if you remember, Dave. They weren't necessarily dominant in the overall result, but they rode the best team race that I've seen, and I think that'll give them a lot of confidence coming into this week. We're looking at Colavita NorCal. Oh, Colavita, I raced for Colavita
great,
in the US when I was there, so a little bit of a close to my heart, this one. And they're certainly looking like they're blobbing along quite well, using a very Zwift tactic for a team time trial to take that 35% draft into effect. But they're coming to the top. What's interesting, they're coming to the top of the KOM, crossing over now. All 6 of their riders are very much together. They've done really, really well. This is probably the neatest formation I've seen in this whole TTT series on this course for any group going over the climb. Gillick was very strong in Richmond last week. So massive kudos to the Revo scores here because they are looking very, very neat.
I agree. When you take a look now, this is a team that has clearly been doing their homework, as we say. Six together, Kate, going back to what you mentioned a few minutes ago, we've only seen a handful of teams finish with six riders today. As a matter of fact, boy, I'm thinking through the 6 or so hours of broadcasting that we've done. I can only really remember a couple of teams that have finished with the full contingent, the full squad. This is much more normal, being down to 4 riders. And at this point now, you have zero wiggle room as we look at a Curry here and the Wadi Inc. team. I was mentioning, Kate, Wadi Inc. is a brand. They're big in triathlon as well here out of California. I love seeing them supporting this sport, much like Socks for Watts, real companies, right, that are making actual products that you can buy. So it's sponsorship that makes sense, kind of closing the circle there. Britt Kogan, I mentioned Emily Arkuri, the Swedish rider. So the Swedish rider on this team is Karen Peters. Kazui Kishima is the Japanese rider, Lisa Worms, and Stephanie Shu. A couple more Americans on the team that we're looking at right now. Well, this is another thing that we are watching, right? The Speedo, I think you call them down there in Australia. How fast are we actually going? And 40 is a nice number on this flat sector right here. As a matter of fact, 40 is what we've been seeing basically more or less the top teams doing through this sector here, Kate, the middle part of the course right now. It's when you look on Zwift Power and you see the course, it looks flatter on paper than it is in real life.
Yeah, I mean, the last course that the team's time trial did was the RGV, and that actually stands for Route Grande Vitesse, which suggests fast. It's French for fast. Well, not quite. In Australia, we have an ad that says Yoplait, which is a yogurt brand, is French for yum. I think I'm saying that RGV is French for fast in much the similar way. But those speeds got pretty high, and they averaged around the 42k an hour mark overall on that course. This course is proving to be a bit slower. That can actually be a bit more of a drag on the legs. But we need to remember that speed doesn't necessarily equate to power because it does very much get determined by what the course is like. So when they are on these flat sections, and of course if we look at the map on the top right of screen, that's where 0%, that's talking about the incline, so 0% would be flat, 2% is slightly uphill. And when they're nudging over the 40k an hour mark on the flat, I think that they're ticking along pretty well. But what they need to make sure is that when they get onto those slight inclines, that they don't lose too much speed, because that can have a really big cumulative effect over the 30 kilometers on their time.
I'd say, Kate, a false flat changes to a climb at about 2 to 3%, right? At 1%, you're absolutely on a false flat where it's barely noticeable. But at 3%, it's no longer a false flat as we look at the Revo Musketeers here. I love being able to take a little in-depth look and see the women that are making the sport so much fun to watch for us. And let's see so there's 2 Revo teams, Revo Scores and the Musketeers. Gail Kocher, Cole White Dog, Michelle B, Paige One Row, and I know I'm missing one, or actually I must be, but that's a nice ride being put together here by the Revo Musketeers as they now get to pick up some momentum. Watch that the speedo start to increase now as they take advantage of this downhill section of the course that they're on. Let's take a look at some splits now, Kate, because it's going to be an 18:48. Look at this. Boy, Revo Scores putting on a clinic out here today. Cryogen Mount Evans sitting in second at 19:40. Not everybody through. We'll see what we get. ATP Racing Swarm. I have a feel. Well, we'll see. Better let them let their legs do the talking out here. 2020 for Wadi Inc. sitting in third currently. 2031 the time for Australia. There you go. ATP Racing Swarm slotting in at second, kind of right tucked nicely in between Revo Scores and Cryogen Mount Evans, Kate. So, okay, we're kind of sorting things out. It's not as tight in this category. And that also speaks to the fact that we have 8 teams versus 20 racing in this group, our final division. And that is not to take anything away in any way from the riders out here. And they will be able to look at their times, stack them up against the teams from around the globe as we're back in with the Australians, the Bada Booms.
Well, the results aren't too dissimilar to the last one we saw, but the gaps are quite interesting because overall in the last TTT, there was about a 4.5 minute differential from Revo Scores, who won, down to the Revo Musketeers, 4.5 minutes behind. Already at the 12K mark, and we have to remember that's not the halfway mark, it's 3 kilometers shy of that halfway mark. It's already out to 3 minutes. That indicates that the overall gap could be up around that 5 minute mark when we consider that the climb was in the first half of this course. So it does look like some of the teams are certainly accelerating a little bit more in the early parts of the race. Dave, that could be for a number of reasons. It could be because the Magnificent Eight course suits their teams and their capabilities a bit more. We're looking at an overtake here. There's a bit of etiquette that goes into overtaking, and certainly that means that the overtaking team should accelerate, and the team being overtaken, which is the Revo Musketeers, they need to pull off to the side a bit and let them pass to make sure that draft effect doesn't grab them at all.
Yeah, and Kate, I got to give these teams credit. That was really well done, and you could see how close that was, right? There were a couple Revo riders that if they had pushed, they would have caused that issue that we don't want to see, which means that they start to commingle the two teams together. I call that cross-pollinating. So, I like to give credit when I see people doing the classy thing, the right thing, and I'll say Revo did a nice job of not what's the term there, right? Taking advantage of a situation. They played that smoothly. Have you ever seen this vulture before? Because I would be very concerned if that was above my team.
I haven't. I love what the Zwift world brings. You might be riding along quite mindlessly, and all of a sudden, a dinosaur steps out in front of you. It's very well done, actually. I haven't seen the vulture, but it's not often that you're riding and you put this view on either. That top-down view. It's great. It's like a helicopter shot.
Well, I heard your countryman, the llama, who Nathan works with on the Zwiftcast. I love that podcast. They really do a great job. Simon, Llama, and Nathan, and he was talking about, they're actually recording tonight and for a fresh one. But he was getting attacked by magpies in Australia. And we have here in the United States too, like red hawks will attack riders. Usually they're going for bright helmets, or I'm not sure what they're going for, but I think they're going for get the heck away from my babies is probably most likely what the message they're trying to send you is.
Apparently that's what the magpies do too. They're going for the babies, but actually they mostly go for people's heads, eyeballs, and helmets.
Oh, that's lovely.
The headgear that Aussies put on in the spring to try and avoid them can be quite amusing. But I feel like you're not an Australian bike rider if you don't have at least one hole in your helmet from a magpie. I certainly have a couple, but it can be terrifying. It can be absolutely terrifying. I've got to say that, and I'm very glad that there's no magpies in the Zwift world.
Yeah, as Alfred Hitchcock's Birds showed us, you don't know fear until you've got a 5-ounce bird attacking you. It's something else. So let's take a look at this split right now. Wadi Inc. fastest there at 18K. But Kate, you made a really good point. That 18K check is basically halfway. It's a little past halfway, to be honest, but you still have 11 kilometers to go. Boy, I tell you what, this Revo Scores team has got it all put together out here. Really strong team. I'm starting to wonder now, what's the closest battle? It looks like maybe the Bada Boom Penn Velo there for 5th and 6th. They're only 4 seconds apart with the Doom Kittens right behind them. So, yeah, you're starting to see some, pretty strong separation going on. ATP here, the Racing Swarm team. I don't know. Okay, let's see if they can make a run at it here.
Yeah, look, I'm very interested in what's happening with Revo Scores and the Racing Swarm, because the gap in the last time we saw them face off in a TTT was a lot closer, and I'm yet to decide whether Revo scores have gone out conservatively, or whether ATP Racing Swarm have gone out quite hard. And I think it also, what we're seeing now is that we're about to see an overtake. And this can actually really play into it because, it's like that old carrot in front of them. And that's something that you certainly get in real life when you see a team up ahead. It can really motivate them. And, let's be honest, there's also a small draft effect, even though the team that is being overtaken will be considerate and use good etiquette and get out of the way. I think it's still a little boost for ATP. Not only that,
Well,
at the 16
psychological
and a
too.
half K mark, yeah, look how neat they are. All six of them riding together. Their heart rates are fairly high, but not outrageously high. So anything pushing into the 180, I would say they're
Look at
overcooking
this.
themselves. But they're doing really well.
Well, and great job, Nathan, because that really shows you both teams here did exactly what you're looking for. I've been really stoked to see because I'll be honest, Kate. Wow, boy, I guess it's getting to be a couple months ago. We used to have these get pretty messy, or they would get messy. These teams are showing respect, and now this is where you just hope they'll back off a little bit because you shouldn't be taking a draft. And I know, I mean, it really is hard to slow down a thoroughbred, right? Kate, asking riders to slow down a
Yeah.
little bit is not normal for them, but you really need to. It's the sporting thing to do. Fair play.
It is. I mean, in Australia, we always reference cricket as kind of the gentlemanly, gentlewoman game where there's so much etiquette involved. But I think cycling is pretty up there. And that's where in real life, there's so many things that go on, all the intricacies that go on within a bike race. And it might be something like when the yellow jersey
I was just
crashes,
going to say
the
exactly.
race doesn't that it doesn't carry on until they're back, or no attacking through a feed zone. Like there's quite a lot of nuances around it, and we're just discovering, I think, bit by bit, all the nuances in the Zwift world, because we have to appreciate that there's a few different kinds of athletes that we're seeing racing in these teams. There's certainly the seasoned IRL racers who have the heart and lungs for it, but they also understand the strategy and they've been bike riders for a long time. And then the other group that we see a lot of people who are new to the sport of cycling, but they may be very strong, they may come from another sport, and they may be very valuable from a physiological perspective within the team, but they might not know all those little nuances we've just spoken about. You put that into the virtual world and it's slightly different again. And I think reading on paper, if you're being overtaken, you must slow down, is quite different to actually experiencing
Yeah.
it. And this will be the first time a lot of these riders are experiencing, what happens when you're either overtaking or you're being overtaken. And from that perspective, and you touched on it at the top of the show, I think that we will see a real evolution throughout this series of teams learning how to race, learning how to ride together, learning their own capabilities. And I think if we project forward to the next season, we might see quite a different skew of racing, and something that is even more entertaining and even more exciting as everybody kind of gets into the groove of how to race in the Zwift world.
I completely agree with that, Kate. It's interesting, there's been around America, anyways. There's a guy named Mr. Rogers who had a children's show, and he had a great line about when there's times of tragedy, when you see scared children, always tell those kids, look for the helpers. There's always going to be helpers. Well, same thing in the Zwift community. If you're new to this, there's people who are really genuinely helpful. Charlotte Backus comes to mind here in the United States. Charlotte has probably helped 30, 40 different women just kind of get an understanding of what's going on, help them figure out how to get on Zwift Power or get validated. A lot of these things are not intuitive. Having someone who's done it before, who's willing to be a mentor, goes a long way. Aren't those ambassadors awesome, Kate? The athletes that take their time, their personal time, to help other people out. As we're looking now to 27:41, fastest time at that split for Revo scores. That is a whopper of a ride here. 28:06, the second fastest time for ATP Storm. I think we're going to go take a look here at the men. All right. So the women we'll start getting some finishing times here shortly, but let's take a look now at the men. This is going to be the middle part of the course as we're picking up Schaefer, the German rider, right now.
So
Let's look at some
it's
splits, Kate.
interesting to
Yep.
remember that when we do look at these splits, the top three at the moment are the only teams that have gone through that 12-kilometer mark. So if we look down below that, OMG, they killed Kenny. They were actually the fastest through that 6-kilometer mark. Great name, isn't it? Good
Yes.
hark to South Park. I'm surprised we don't actually have a Simpsons team, but maybe next season
Oh,
somebody
we'd
can
probably
entertain us with
do.
that. But yeah, probably somewhere in the league. But the Altibajos, they started pretty well. I mean, they had a pretty good 6K split time. They've increased the pace again to the 12K, and again, just like the women, it's such a telling part of the course because they do go over that KOM, and it is the 12K split, Dave, that I think shows a lot more about how the team's going than simply the six. But we've been talking
Absolutely.
about the etiquette of overtaking, and we can actually see two teams in shot here. So that's exactly what we
Yep.
are seeing, that two teams are running into each other. They do start a minute apart, but over 30 kilometres, which is over 40 minutes of racing, a minute can dwindle away very quickly. There was only a minute and 15 between the top seven in the Division A of America West last week. So that top end is very tight, but at the bottom end of the chart, that does drop off a bit.
Wow. Well, speaking of dropping off a bit, there we go. Dutch Diesel Cycling Hayes a 16:35 at the 12K check, which is going to be over that's Nathan's team right there. Nathan helped these guys earlier. He's loving it, man. They're having quite a ride. 16:36. Wow. So DDC in full effect. It's not over, but boy, they're making a statement through the middle part of the course right now, Kate. Then a 17:08 for Evo. Out the Bajos with oh boy, oh my God, they killed Kenny. 16:31. Kate, your familiarity tells me that you do have South Park in Australia. You've seen it clearly.
Yeah, yeah, we sure do.
Yeah.
We love Kenny. I think I used to have a pencil case with Kenny's little face on it. But it's a great team name. But it says to me that there's a little bit of spirit in the team. They came in
Yes.
fourth in the
Yes.
first TTT, but at the time we did note that they were negative splitting it. So the back end of their race around the RGV was faster than their front end, and we pontificated at the time that perhaps they hadn't gone as hard as they could have, and they had a few too many matches left in the box at the end. It looks to me like they're doing a better job here. Let's hope they haven't done the opposite and gone out hard. And we say here, you mushroom cloud at the end. I guess you understand the reference there, that you really do blow up. Something quite nuclear that you can see anywhere. And hopefully we don't see that. But OMG, they kill Kenny. They're looking really good at the moment. And the DDC Hayes, I mean, I know Nathan's very excited. I'm sure he's not on the bike racing with them at the moment, but maybe he's there in spirit.
Oh, oh, believe me, he thought about racing, Kate. He was very close to racing. We were about a heartbeat away from having our producer also in the race. It would have been a historic moment, that's for sure. Nathan's enthusiasm for this is infectious, that's for sure. And there's no one who loves racing. I honestly, Kate, you and I'm going to guess between us. I don't want to guess the number of years, but we're talking more than 5 decades, right, between us of being involved in the sport of cycling in one way or another, I would think. I've never met anyone who has more enthusiasm.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
I love
we're
it.
edging definitely up to that, and I agree, and I love that so many of these teams have such passionate roots behind them. I really think that there is this real attitude that people are very excited about the Zwift world, around the possibilities that can come about getting teams together. And more than that, I think if we drill down to an individual level, a lot of the athletes, and let's include Nathan in that, are finding what their potential is, because it is quite different than racing in the real world. Nathan's a very good mountain biker in the real world, but the Zwift is quite something different, and I think it brings a challenge even to the very best. We saw in the women's APAC, Michelle Ferris, a silver medalist at the Olympics in track cycling in the sprint. she was bombing it at the front of the team time trial. And I love seeing that. I think as a whole new life to her retirement. If you can say that somebody
I
retires
love it.
in their early 30s. But Michelle
You
Ferris
know,
has certainly made a bit of a comeback in the virtual world. It's awesome.
check this out, Kate. The 2020 team, even though she doesn't race in the ZRL, Kristen Armstrong has been routinely showing up and racing with that. She's a part owner of the squad with Nikki Cranmer, but she's been racing with the women, having a blast. I mean, for them, think about that. That's the super VIP experience. You got into Zwift racing, and now you're racing with the three-time Olympic gold medal winner. How cool is that? That's a priceless experience, and that's what this is all about. We're looking at the Audi A team. You know what I'm saying, though, Kate? These experiences are what is getting quite a few people mentally and physically through this really tough COVID lockdown period for folks. As this Audi team, I always think of the Pacific Northwest here in America. They've had a strong men's and women's team. Laura Matson Co. has raced for Audi on the road as we look at the squad working quite well right now. I'm going to guess these guys are. I'm going to have to find out if this is coming out of the Seattle Pacific Northwest area. That's another part of the country known for its rain here, Kate. Kind of a almost a
Which makes
yeah,
them
well,
prime for the virtual world of
Zwift.
cycling, I guess.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
You're picking up what I'm
When
putting
it's
down. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think it's also really cool that we see a lot of the teams racing both in real life and in the virtual world, but across a number of different leagues, in different locations. For the most part, America's West, as the name would suggest, are North Americans, but there's also a lot of Australians in there, some South Africans. Last night in APAC, we had a lot of Japanese riders turning up there. I think it is accessible. The only thing that really limits you is your willingness to get up at an odd time zone. And based on the workflow of both yourself, Dave, and our producer, Nathan, you work into the wee hours, commentating all around the world sometimes. And that's the brilliant thing. There's no limitation on the riders doing that if they want as well. And it makes it more accessible for some of the riders who have a full-time job to be able to race in a time
Well,
zone that suits their evening, which is pretty cool.
absolutely, and I think that is part of the why this league has been so successful because you'll see that we have a couple of the teams in North America that race in the European European East division because it works for them. Same thing here. We have a few these Costa Rican flags. That's nice to see right now. A team coming out of Central America. So South and Central America are starting to come on strong in this time zone, I guess you would say. As here we go. Thanks, Nathan. Jumping right in with the Costa Rican squad. Oh, Costa Rica is such a beautiful nation to visit. It's a real crown jewel of Central America. And
Well,
this is
they've
a
got a
team
great
looking
kit too,
really
and
strong.
we've got a man bun, Dave.
Yeah,
Most of the riders have helmets, but we've got some funky hairdos going on there. I must say
a
that a lot
mohawk.
of the women I've spoken to have really enjoyed putting their avatars together and giving themselves different hairstyles, almost as a try it before you buy it. They've seen what they look like as a blonde with a pony or whatever, which is quite funny. But look, this is retro, like the man bun. We've got a bit of a moustache happening. It's Movember in Australia. Do you do Movember in the
Oh,
States? I'm not sure,
absolutely.
but
Fighting
oh,
prostate
there you
cancer
go.
by
He's
growing a mustache. Yeah.
yeah, correct. So Burford, he gets the win for the Movember so far. Let's just see if Zwift facilitate that growing into a bit of a a bigger
Well, and
moustache by the end of
and
the
Kate,
month. Let's see.
I know you don't want to blow your own horn, but Australia, by all popular accounts, is where the man bun was invented, from what I heard. So I think we're going
So
to jump back in now with the women. So let's see what we've got. Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. Awesome job. Waddy Inc. here. We've got Peters. Let's see what we've got now because they're not far from the finish, Kate. They're within about 500 meters of being done and dusted here for Waddy Inc. Let's bring them on home. 4 riders, so they're okay. They'll get a time out of this group. Job well done, ladies. Let's put a time up on the board now.
they're looking very neat, and from the get go, they've rotated quite well. They haven't really been in a straight pace line for any part of the course, but that's also not necessarily the fastest way to do it. There are definitely alternate strategies that depend on the mix of riders you have. What I love is it looks like they're all coming to the line in very close proximity. We see a lot of the teams, Dave, where one or two accelerate off the front in those final couple of 100 meters, and to me that doesn't make a lot of sense because the timing is based on the fourth rider across the line. So they head up to the finish line here, pretty high powers, over 300 watts. They'll be the first team to register there at the finish. And they were in pretty good shape out on course. So let's see where Waddy Inc. finish overall. They were fourth in the split times out on course. They did start in fourth. They've been consistently fourth throughout the way. Penn Velo, they're coming into the final now. They were consistently fifth along the way, only 8 seconds behind Waddy Inc. at that 18K mark. They've got less than a kilometre to go here for the Penn Velo. And similar, Dave, to Waddy Inc., the four of them are riding really well together in a bit of a blob and moving along quite nicely around that 40K an hour mark.
You wouldn't think that saying a bit of a blob would be a compliment, but it is, without any doubt. So looking at Jessica Karste, Laura Mace, M.A. Levinson, and Yvonne Walbrol. So, I'm not sure. Penn Velo could refer to a couple things here in the United States. There's Peninsula Velo, which is out of the San Francisco area. And then there's also a Penn Velo up in Minnesota. I don't know if you know Minnesota, Kate. Oh, sure you do. It's San Francisco version for Penn Velo. That makes some sense. But Kate, you probably did race up in Minnesota now that you think about it, the old North Star or Nature Valley race.
Yeah, I did. I raced a bit around Minnesota. I love Minnesota. I didn't actually race a lot in California. I mean, a little bit down south, but I never actually went too far north in California. A lot of the racing I did over there was certainly more East Coast than it was West Coast.
I was going to ask.
A lot of great places to ride bikes over there.
We're doing okay. So are you. I think you can go anywhere in the globe and find cool places to ride. I was wondering if you ever did that Amgen Tour California team time trial. That's the only real women's team time trial I remember at a high level in the United States. Did you do that race as Penn Velo finishes? We'll get a time for everybody here as well. When it's appropriate, we'll start being able to show you finishing times. Did you do that Tour of California? Team time trial?
I didn't. That it kind of shows my age, actually, Dave. I was into retirement when that kicked off.
Yeah.
Yes. I can't believe I'm actually at the age now where I'm having to admit that. But there it is. I missed out on that. In fact, team time trials weren't a huge thing for the women in my day. They were toward the end of my career, but it certainly picked up a lot through that. But with a track background, I did a lot of team pursuiting as well with the blokes and got a few of the tips from that. Revo, they're going over the finish line. They're finishing pretty thick and fast here now, Dave. Wow. And look at the AHDRL team. They're moving along quickly, and they've got 6 riders. Well, 5 riders there, many. But we had 6 before. But they're doing very well. They're looking very neat and moving very fast.
Yeah, I would agree, Kate, as we're going to be finishing up here. And boy, that Revo scores time at 27:41. That is a world-class ride. Excuse me, that's their split that we're looking at from 18K. But the time that they put up is clearly going to be the class of the field. So the Bada Boom squad across the line here. And again, we're collecting all of these times. Don't worry. We'll be able to give you a nice look at how it plays out for all 8 teams as we've got ATP, the Racing Swarm, coming in hot, Kate.
Well, they're all. It's interesting. Some of the teams have pushed out toward the 46, 47 minute mark. But ATP Swarm, they were second behind the Revo scores in the first team's time trial. They're 3-4 minutes below some of those other finishing times. They're moving really well. They're looking really neat. We haven't seen a lot of gaps opening up out on course. In fact, big kudos to all the teams because in APAC, we saw huge gaps. We saw some really big explosions within teams where a lot of gaps were opening up and they weren't working super well together despite their best efforts. And I think, it's a bit of to and fro with that, but absolute gold star effort to all of these teams because we haven't seen a team finish without 4 riders yet. And I mean, that's pretty impressive. I don't know about the leagues you've watched today, Dave, but
No, this
APAC
is
was certainly a bit messier.
this has been the cleanest category. That was Barbara Fazoli finishing up with the ATP Swarm team a moment ago there. She was our first ever winner, if I remember correctly, back to week 1 of the ZRL, our community winner here. So across the line, here's the Hell Kittens bringing it home, Kate. Kind of in that neighborhood that you were talking about. A bunch of teams were sitting up around 46, although I have to acknowledge that these times will correct themselves, as sometimes you'll see that depending on where they started. So don't be so sure. Well, the one nice thing is they'll collect all the data and we'll get a good look at the results here in a moment. So that's going to be, I think Waddy Inc. finished already. So looking at some riders warming down, probably, or bringing, well, what they're doing is finishing their ride. Yep.
Yeah, so we've got the two that were dropped out on course somewhere finishing. It's great to see them finishing together. That's a lot of really solid teamwork as well. We go back over to the men,
The
and
men.
at that 18 mark, the Gold Rush team marginally ahead of OMG. They killed Kenny, but what? This is a tight race. Only 7 seconds with 12K left to race at that split, and that's quite interesting, and that is quite different to what we saw in that
And look
first
at Dutch
TTC. I
Diesel.
actually think, Dutch Diesel are looking neat. It's
Only
interesting
two.
coming off that dirt. I think can be an interesting section just for the Evo. But sorry, Dave, yeah, the Dutch Diesel team, they're not too far behind either. Only 2 seconds off. OMG, they killed Kenny, which is an improvement from that 12 kilometer mark. So I don't know. I mean, a DDC Hayes on the up and Kenny on the down. It'll be interesting how they come into the finish.
DDC Hayes is now mad at me because they're saying, why did you make Nathan produce? You could do that because we need him out here today. One more engine would help a lot, right? Look how close this is, 19 to 26 to 28. So right there, your top 3 teams are sitting within 10 seconds of each other. But look a little further back, Kate, 37 and 38 there. So when you look at this now, from 24-19 to 24-38, you have 5 teams, and there's going to be some corrections with these times. This might be even closer than we think. And most importantly, Kate, I'm not saying that that's it's a stale take that we're looking at there with that split, but that was 15 minutes ago. We've done a lot of racing since we were at 18 kilometers to go, or 18 kilometers in, excuse me, as they're coming up on, well, 29.2 is a really close estimate to the actual distance out here. So this team is within less than 3K to the finish. It's this tunnel, and then that 3% ramp up, and then the run into downtown Watopia, and it's done and dusted.
And this is a point that they can really consolidate the speed. And look, we can compliment them for having 6 riders to the finish. But equally, Dave, we can discuss the merits of the different strategies because there's been a lot of instances and a lot of teams that have essentially had a sacrificial lamb or two that have pulled some really big turns through that desert section, and then they have dropped off, and they've only finished with 4, but certainly not due to a weakness of any of the riders, but very much a strategy. Other teams, the absolute best strategy with a very equal group of riders is to finish with the 6 and consistently roll through. Keep, as we say,
Kate,
out on the road, even we say fresh horses when a new one goes to the front.
Well, Kate, I just learned something. You can always look to nature for answers. The dolphins are using the blob technique. I don't know if you saw them.
I like that. They're listening. Maybe they're listening to us.
Right. Well, you know how the geese always know how the geese know how to ride in a pellet or an echelon, right? Or so they fly in an echelon. Well, here's a team that is really put it together. You're going to only see a couple teams finishing with 6 riders as Kate, and Nathan really brought this up in some earlier races as well. Having a full contingent of squad is really a difference maker at this point. This is going to get you a couple seconds, and the sacrificial lamb point was a very good one. Here's a great time to use up a rider completely. Just, you know what I'm saying? Squeeze that last bit of blood out of that stone, because here we go. It's going to be close. No doubt about it. We've got 3 teams within 9 seconds.
They know based on the numbers that they're seeing, they know that they need to absolutely leave nothing in the tank. This is the time to leave it all out there. And their heart rates, Cree is at 178. That's pretty high. But Kong before he was edging close to 190. That says to me that he's absolutely leaving everything out there. I would say their team instruction for Evo right now is to just go, go, go. Even if a few gaps do open up, again, we can say, don't do that. There's no smarts in that. But if the instruction is everybody just go as hard as you possibly can in this final kilometer, generally gaps won't open too big.
It works
They
itself
are all
out, doesn't
pushing
it?
as hard as they can. It does, and I think you need to be careful when you can't see their faces. And this is why I love some live pictures of the actual riders sometimes on their trainers. When you can't see their faces, we're just going off their heart rates to see how they're going. But anything over 180, as we're seeing with Schaefer here, as they cross the line, that is pretty high. Evo, they are absolutely pushing the limits because they have lost two riders in this final 2 kilometres. So I say good on them. They've really thrown the gauntlet down.
Yeah, this is where you might as well ride it like you stole it, right? Because there's not a lot of thinking. You don't want to organize. It's just let's get to the finish. This is when the horse is galloping. It can smell the barn. It knows it's going to be eating here in a couple of minutes. So let's just get this one over with because that's a really good job by Evo here to try to close things out. And yeah, so, they're fighting for trying to get themselves up into the top five. This is points based out here. If you've been riding along with us for the last few weeks, you're well aware of that. This is our second team time trial, and we've got a couple more to look forward to. We'll be back with the scratch points race format next week as we're in with Masuda now.
Well,
Let's see what we've got here.
Some of these events will suit some teams more than others. Interesting bike choice here by Masuda. He's actually on a time trial bike. You might instinctively think that's a great idea, but it actually lessens the draft effect for the riders behind him. So that's an interesting choice of bike there. And I think that bike choice is something that we probably don't talk about enough in relation to this, Dave, but it does make a big difference, doesn't it?
Well, in real life, you'd have four riders on time trial bikes. But Kate, the second thing is he doesn't get a draft off of other riders on a time trial bike. Nathan will correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that's the case. Where, yeah. So really, what you've got is a faster bike, right? And they can draft him, but he doesn't get any draft. So that's a pretty tough way to do it. It's not ideal. Nathan has mentioned a scenario where, and I can see it, where you could theoretically, especially in WTRL where you've got 8 riders, possibly put a rider in a time trial bike and have him go set an early pace for you and get you out fast. But that's not a long-term plan. But I'm going to throw it back to you, Kate. We're going to bring DDC Hayes home. Let's see how they did out here.
Well, they were toing and froing, weren't they, with OMG? They killed Kenny. It absolutely is going to come down to the finish here. They can't afford to sit up even for a second. They crossed the line. It looks to be a pretty good time. That will get, they may get slightly adjusted, but they were pushing toward that 50k an hour mark in that finish. Last week, they averaged around the 47.5 kilometre mark all around. This course is a little bit slower than the RGV course, a little bit higher power. That does burn at the legs a bit more, but they had a brilliant ride. Now, this is what I'm really interested to see here. OMG, of course, they're the Kenny team we keep talking about, and they have been just inching a little bit in front of DDC the whole way. They started a bit faster, slowed a bit by that 18 kilometre mark, but along 12k to the finish. So they're only going on the data that we can also see. They know that they have to absolutely push every single centimetre, millimetre to that line. It's not over until it is over. They've still got 4 riders. They go through the finishing line. Well, it'll be interesting.
That's going to be really close.
Comes out. I think that was really close.
Well, yeah, Kate, and the thing I've learned is that whatever you think might be impossible, like a tie, it is possible. And that one's going to be fun to look at. We have, don't worry, folks, we will be looking at all of our results. We like to make sure that we get them right. We're in with the Dirty Rascals Riots team now. and Lawrence. So if you're looking at the bottom left hand, so you can see that checkered flag showing you the teams that have finished now already. And it won't be long until, well, they've got a little ways to go, actually, when you look at it, about 4.2K in front of the Dirty Rascals Riot.
Well, and
Now,
they were the winners in the first TTT as well, the Dirty Rascals, right? So when we look at where the
they're
teams
going to
are
lose
out,
a
of
guy,
course,
Kate, right in front of
well,
our
this
eyes
isn't a bad
there.
time to lose a guy. I mean, it depends though. If they're losing a guy because over that the dirt section, he just couldn't keep up. That's not so good. But if they're losing him because he did a bit of a turn at the front, then that's pretty good strategy.
I hear
And
you.
it's not too dangerous to be down to even 4 riders. They've still got
Not at all.
5, but they've only
Yeah.
got 4 odd kilometers left to go.
Kate, I would say that actually, I'm going to go with the latter, what you said. I think that most likely that rider took a good hard pull through one of the more challenging sectors there, right? When you hit the dirt sectors, basically, if you're on a 3% grade, it feels like a 5%. It's a real challenge. And so using up a rider at that point, it's sort of like that chess match, right? You might want to sacrifice a bishop or a knight right now for a faster time. And it's a numbers game as well. But I'm liking what we're seeing here from the dirt team. Definitely bringing this one
It
home. Still have 5 riders, so they're making a good run at this, Kate.
And they're at pretty high speed going through here. It is flat, not even false flat, but just absolutely flat, edging toward that high 40k an hour mark, which is clipping along. That's pretty fast. It's interesting because in real life, in a team's time trial, the riders won't often get out of that tuck position. And sometimes that means that when they're accelerating, especially up small inclines, when it goes around the 1, 2, 3%, that they won't actually get out of their seat, but they'll continue to stay seated and push through it. The difference here is that a lot of the riders will get out of your seat, and it's perfectly on cue. Thank you, Mossman, for doing that cryogen. He gets out of his seat to accelerate, but that actually increases the power differential quite substantially over if you're seated and doing a seated acceleration. And the riders need to be really wary of that because if they were on the road behind each other, they would see someone get out of their seat and they could react to that. In the Zwift world, again, we use that bingo word, communicate. They need to make sure on Discord that they are able to see each other. We're looking at Costa Rica now. Oh, for a second there, Dave, the shot, I thought we only had 3 riders. I was having a bit of a panic for these fellas here. But thankfully, we have 5, which is great. And our old mate, Man Bun, he's in there solidly. Our Movember winner, he's still in there with 5, and they're looking pretty neat.
Anytime, Kate, that your 5-rider team looks like 3, you're doing something right. You're obviously incredibly aerodynamic, and these guys are just about home now. Viva Costa Rica! There's our finish, and that's a good one. It's a very good one from these guys. Let's see. We don't have too many teams out on course at this point. Just about home.
Well, and Costa Rica, they were 6th in the last TTT, but they're actually sitting 4th overall. I think that they are stronger than their last team's time trial showed us. So I wouldn't be surprised if they edged a little further up the leaderboard today.
That's a good
Cryo
point.
RDT coming in with 4 riders. Again, this seems to be quite a common theme that they're dropping a few riders coming into these final kilometers. Again, there's a lot of strategy that can go into that being a really helpful team strategy for them. But they look neat, and as long as those 4 get over the line together, they'll record a time, pardon me.
All right, Mr. Mossman, one of our heroes on the day for the CryoGen team, as they'll finish up, and it looks like we're in with Finesse Wahoo now, bringing this one home. Some familiar names have been showing up on our screen as well, and it makes sense because the top teams were seeded last to go out on course. So I've noticed, like Fraser Moran, some previous winners that we've had is the American Limb with the Wahoo team, done and dusted. Well, it's you know what? This one's a nail biter.
Well, we saw a heart rate over 190 there, ouch. And you notice when they cross the finish line, Dave, that their avatars just stop dead. I think they're probably heaving over their handlebars.
Bucket time, we call it around here.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. It's quite funny to imagine that that's what's going on. And we've got some interesting hairdos here. It's not that we're talking about the hairdos of the avatars, but I love that the riders can have a little bit of fun when they're putting their riders together. And the Dirty
Wow.
Rascals are looking pretty good. A lot of them. Look at that! Isn't that fabulous with that matching
COVID
sweatband? Uh,
COVID hasn't been easy on all of us,
retro.
though.
Yes, yeah, perhaps you changed that up mid COVID, hairdressers closed and all. Quite a number of Tron bikes, and a Tron bike is fairly versatile in any event. We know it's fast. We also know they've done a lot of climbing kilometres, so they're pretty solid riders, and they cross the line. As 5 riders, they've done really well. That was neat. And we've got some great facial hair again. We're going to keep talking about this facial hair and see how it evolves through the series, and if Zwift helps them grow that a little bit further. A lot of riders stop dead. Again, we discussed how exhausting this is, these teams' time trials. Certainly some of these heart rates that we've seen, Dave, 192 I saw crossing the line, the high 180s. You're dead right. A lot of people would think they're having a heart attack if their heart rate was going that high. But that's how hard they're pushing. So we'll take a look at some of the results as they come through. But pretty good racing tonight. And I've got to say, Dave, I'm most impressed with the form of the teams. It's quite different to 2 weeks ago when we saw their first team's time trial. This week, they're a lot more organised. They're working better together. And I think as a whole, a lot of the teams have evolved.
I agree, Kate. That steep learning curve that we talked about, we're at the end of it. As they said, I'm supposed to learn everything in my first rodeo. Well, yeah, around here you are. We don't have time to take you to 5 rodeos to get you up to speed. We need to get going here. So we're going to take a look at the results now, and we're going to move through this pretty quickly here. A lot of great racing around the globe today. What a fantastic day it was. Let's jump right in. I'll take the first one, Kate, with Revo Scores taking the win in our Women's America West Division 1A. 43:33 was the winning time. Then you see ATP Racing Swarm in second, Cryogen Mount Evans taking third. And you can see how, those gaps were pretty large out there today as Revo Scores was outstanding. Let's take a look at the standings now. And there you go, 79 for Revo Scores. They're up on top of the table, and we're getting some pretty clear separation here as ATP Racing Swarm in second, just 2 points back. So it's going to be a battle all the way to the final race. Cryogen Mount Evans sitting in third. There's another close one. BRT Doom Kittens sitting right now in fourth. And then you can see 2 teams locked up at 59 points. Fifth is a tie right now for Penbello and Waddy Inc. Then you got Revo, Instafund, and AHDRL. So, Kate, it's going to be interesting here now what happens over the next couple of weeks to see if ATP Racing Swarm, they got a sniff of victory. So I'm interested to see how this one's going to play out. This is going to be a fun division. Great racing out there.
Yeah, and this changes the strategy because we talked last week in Richmond about different ways to earn points, and that it wasn't all about actually going across the line first. Your team would be better off in second, third, and fourth if that was the way you did it. So effectively, you can have a rider from another team attack off the front and not even bother chasing because it's better for you and the team to stay together in the back. I think that kind of strategy will come into play more, especially as Revo Scores only marginally ahead of the ATP Swarm ladies. There's a bit of separation there, but let's not pretend that third through seventh, which is also quite a tight race in that part, that they're not also really pushing very hard to get that third spot. So it's almost a race of 2 races, which we see happen in a lot of in real life racing when we're going for points jerseys or overall in tours. And so I think it's rounding out to be a really interesting ride.
It's interesting. Sometimes when you're in a battle like this, it can be better, as Kate says, to let other teams go up the road, take the points, because sometimes it's not that you have to win them, it's that you don't want your competitor to win them. It's a lot of things about bike racing as you learn more. So interesting along the lines of it's not about what your strengths are. Sometimes it's about what's the weakness that you can find in your competitor and trying to exploit that. That's why I love this sport so much, Kate, is it's in no way intuitive. We use the joke about this is no exercise contest. You can go do that at your spin class, or I don't know where you go do that. But this is bike racing, and there's a lot to it. And man, the team time trial days are decidedly different than what we're going to be doing next week. But it sounds like we're queuing up some more results for you here. Kate, I'll throw it back to you as we take a look at how it all played out here today. Again, America's West. This wraps it up for week 4 of the ZRL Community Racing Day.
And we had a really tight race in the men. We were getting pretty excited about what was happening out on course. And we had our answer now. FW Gold Rush, well, they won. But look at how tight that top 5 is, in particular, that top 4. But let's just look. So Gold Rush, they took the win. And they were 3rd in the last one. So very good ride. But OMG, they killed Kenny. They have edged ahead of DDC Hayes. And they rode that all the way to the line. The differential, Dave, was only a couple of seconds the whole way along. They've pushed right to that finish, and that is very, very good racing. Dirty Rascals, they're our winners in the first TTT. They've conceded nearly 10 seconds to Gold Rush on this occasion, which is a considerably different margin and result to that first one where they were 23 seconds ahead. Penn Velo in 5th, Audi A coming in 6th, Cryogen Perisord in 7th, but also very tight between 5, 6 and 7, Costa Rica in 8th. The Evo Altibajos in 9th, GDC Neville coming in 10th. So they did drop off in speed a bit in that bottom end, but certainly that top 9, incredibly tight racing. And the 4 seconds between OMG They Kill Kenny and DDC Cycling Haze, to us, looked like the race out there. We didn't even realise from the splits quite how tight FW Gold Rush and OMG They Killed Kenny were. We thought that it was just DDC Cycling Haze and Kenny that were tight, but in fact we have 3 within 7 seconds, which is seriously impressive riding in the America's West Division A. And Dave, I think this is setting us up for a very competitive few weeks ahead. Now, if we go over to the D, Dave, I'll hand that over to you. The B grade, sorry.
Oh, hey, thanks. Yeah, KRTB, the Big Timbers. I was just stunned with your awesome pronunciation of Altibajos. Sounds like you spent some time in Mexico. So KRTB, Big Timbers, taking it out. And I love this name. This might be my favorite name of the day. The Zwiffer Dusters taking the silver medal there, matched evenly on watts per kilogram, but a little bit more efficient than the Dirty Rascal Believers. But they had a great ride there, taking the bronze medal today. Another one of the DDC squads, the Dutch Diesel Cycling Zeelbrekers, 108 back for 4th. DDC Slaken in 5th, just 20 seconds behind the other DDC team, Dirty Rascals, in 6th. Then you got Pickle Juice. That was fun discussion today, Kate. 140 back for 7th. ATP Racing Krypton in 8th. Penn Velo B1 in 9th. And then Musette La Crocodile in 10th. So that's a look at the B's. Kate, I'll give it to you for the C's.
So in the C's, we've got some great names in here too. We've got the Dirty Rascals Ambush. They took the win, 56 seconds ahead of Cryogen Grand Colombier. Again, we're looking at those fabulous mountain names for Cryogen. Lightning Velo in 3rd, a minute 41 adrift on the same time as Panda Candy Racing. So they have edged ahead when they come down to those tenths and hundredths of a second. But great racing there. Dirty Rascals Padres, they came in 5th. The Sun Controllable, that's a great name too, in 6th. Dirty Rascals Affogato in 7th. The Dirty Rascals Grind in 8th. The Deadpool's X-Force in 9th. And the Zwift Crushin' Daddies in 10th. Good on the Crushin' Daddies. They were 3 minutes down on those leaders, but actually quite consistent gaps the whole way through with the Ambush team certainly coming out in top there. So if we look at the overall division here, Dave, in the Division A, the FW Gold Rush, 76 points on the top of that tally, but the Dirty Rascals Riot, only 1 point behind on 75. There's then a substantial gap back to OMG. They killed Kenny, but based on today's performance, I think they are on the up and up. DDC Hayes in the same category. They're on 62 points. Costa Rica on 60 points in 5th. Audi A, 59 points in 6th. Perisord Cryogen in 7th on 57 points. Tenvelo A, 53 points. Zwift HQ Rockets A in 9th. And the Altibajos in 10th, down on 40 points. So it's pretty tight at the top of that leaderboard and pretty tight in the middle. Dave, over to you for the Division B.
Thank you, Kate. KRTB Big Timbers then are going to be sitting on 78 points, a commanding lead here for our men's Bs. Dirty Rascal Stampede, 70 points for second. DDC, the Zeal Breakers, 64 points. You can see where this is where it gets really tight. Third, fourth, and fifth. It's going to be ATP Racing Krypton sitting in fourth. Zwiffer Dusters in fifth. Dirty Rascals Believers in sixth. The Pickle Juice TFC team in seventh. Penbello B1 in eighth. It's ninth right now for Wadi Inc. B1, and then Musette Le Crocodile. Rounding out our top 10 on points there, but you can see the Big Timbers living up to their name.
And over to Division C, we've got Cryogen Grand Colombier. They are leading on 79 points ahead of Dirty Rascals Ambush on 74. That's a 5-point gap. That's significant compared to some of the other divisions. Z Sun Controllable on 65 points. Also on 65 is Lightning Velo. Panda Candy on 61. A pretty tight leaderboard here. Dirty Rascals Grind on 59 points in 6th spot. 7th spot, Deadpool's X-Force. In 8th, Dirty Rascals Affogato on 46 points. Aero Appaloosa on 38 points in 9th. And BZNB in 10th place on 37 points. So in all of the categories, Dave, we're seeing quite a tight leaderboard at the top and also quite tight through that middle section. So I think we've got a lot of exciting racing coming ahead and perhaps some new strategies because as we discussed just before with the points racing, there's many different ways to win if you're looking at the overall series, and it's not necessarily about just winning each individual race.
Agreed. What a day. It wraps up a whirlwind tour around the globe. I'm in love with team time trialing, Kate. It's an absolute blast getting to watch these athletes bringing out the best in each other and clearly having some fun along the way. So I'll throw it back to you, Kate, for some final words, but thanks again for a fun ride today.
Well, thanks for joining me tonight, Dave, and to everybody who tuned in. We've, of course, got some exciting racing, same time, same place next week for the America West Division. But make sure you check the WTRL website, WTRLracing.com, to make sure you stay abroad of all the results, all the different Zwift Community Live broadcasts that are going on. And for anybody who might be thinking about getting on Zwift and racing, do it, commit to it. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun calling this racing. So, Dave, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Right on.